In war, the line between reality and nightmare is often blurred. Some things you can explain: gunfire, flares, footsteps in the dark. But then there are the things that defy explanation: lights in the sky, silence on the radio, entire patrols frozen in fear under a jungle canopy that hides more than the enemy. This isn't just another war story. It's a record of what some soldiers saw, and what they were never allowed to talk about again. Tonight, from deep in the forgotten firebases of Vietnam, we bring you the story of strange lights that floated where no aircraft should be. Silent, glowing, unblinking. What were they? And why did they come? This is the Smoke Pit, and these are true stories from men who never forgot what they saw. You ever see something in the dark and pray it didn't see you? The Vietnam jungle has a way of turning shadows into nightmares. In the dim light of a single blinking radio tower, a squad sat tense and silent, listening for the usual snap of twigs or distant voices on the wire. The humid night air was thick with the smell of earth and the distant stench of napalm. From a far hilltop, an artillery gun idly drilled its bore. Far off, enemy mortars fell into the valley, like a slow, regular heartbeat. For a moment, every soldier felt like the hunter, not the hunted. That was the scene on the night our story begins. Men in this remote fire support base were restless and on edge. In that darkness, every rustle felt like an attack. It was late 1968, and the war had been grinding on for years. Out on the edges of friendly territory, U.S. firebases perched like metal skinheads in a green hell. By design, they were tiny improvised forts. A bare ring of howitzers and concertina wire, a handful of infantry, a few shining helipads and landing zones, and a single communications bunker with operators on 24-hour watch. Inside, the men kept their lights low and their nerves high. Every rustle from the jungle could mean an NVA rifleman or worse. This was Grunt's world now. Each man's life was measured in these cautious rhythms. None of them could throw that memory away. In one official journal, the mood of that war is written in ink. The diary of the 23rd Infantry Division's Chu Lai Defense Command documents a late-night surprise. On January 6, 1969, Tower 72 reported an entry in neat clipped prose. 272 reports object flying into their area, about 700 meters in front of them. Object came in slow. When object moves, it has a glowing light, about 15 to 20 feet across, shaped like a big egg. No sound. An egg-shaped glowing object, utterly silent, drifting over the jungle at night. The entry reads unnaturally calmly. You can imagine the hands that wrote it trembling. This isn't fantasy. It's official record, chillingly factual. The officer on watch even wrote this down, because sometimes you have to believe your eyes. Whatever it was, that strange log wasn't the only report of its kind. By morning, the duty log of January 7th and 8th lay blank, as if someone made sure that entry vanished. The only line anyone dared write was, "All quiet. No contacts." After that, fear and silence settled like dust over the camp. It became a ghost story told quietly at night watches. In short order, the incident vanished into rumor. A fire base like that in 1969 was basically a small fort with a big gun battery. Imagine 6 artillery pieces pointed out across the perimeter, each a sleeping giant, ready to wake with a word. Helipads sat ready for resupply, surrounded by muddy trenches and camo nets. Radio bunkers, medic stations, and machine gun nests filled the gaps. In the darkness, every silhouette could hold a fighter. Every shadow might be death. Under that dim moonlight, vigilance was their constant companion. Despite the firepower, these men were vulnerable. A bamboo outpost with a single heartbeat. They stayed awake in shifts. One gunner kept popping his cheap cigarette in the pit. Another slogged through the radio logbook, writing the same empty phrases. The mosquito netting whined under the clamor of bugs. A distant bird call froze the men in place. The whine of generators and distant aircraft kept a restless hum in the air. Every man knew his neighbor's face by heart in the flicker of low-power bulbs. Each sensed it could be a foe lurking in the shadows. Out here, even silence can scream, and every second passed like a mine ticking down. On the night our story begins, First Lieutenant Maria Diaz had just finished her chow and was beginning her inspection rounds. A rifle slung on her shoulder, she moved through the haze, tracing the outer wires with her eyes. The base had been quiet for hours. Even the monsoon rain had passed, and the jungle was unnervingly still, except for the distant rumble of artillery guns. Some still expected a shot to ring out from the jungle at any moment. Each man's nerves were wound taut. No one dared admit how uneasy they felt. They all knew each other's cover songs by heart. But tonight's silence made every unknown sound louder. It was the kind of stillness where every man and machine strained for a sound. Even the cicadas held still. Corporal Hank Grumpy Harris pulled a field radio into the comms bunker and noticed something odd. Through the static channel came a burst of rapid voices, speaking an unintelligible tongue. He hit the mic. "Hawkeye! Do you copy?" Nothing replied except a loud static crackle. For a full 10 seconds, the radio went dead. Everyone looked at each other. Sergeant Roberts stared at the ceiling. Harris rubbed his hands together nervously. "Lost you," Harris said. "You get that, Sarge." "Nothing got that bad, soldier," the sergeant muttered. But Harris's gaze had already shifted. A pale glow caught his eye. He pointed at the bunker entrance and whispered, "Sir, I see something." Across the jungle's edge, above the tree line, a pinpoint of light gleamed, golden and steady. It didn't flash like a flare. It just floated there, like a small star. Harris set the radio down and raised his binoculars. He adjusted the lens, heart hammering. At first he thought it was a spotlight or tracer round, but it held its position. Then another point of light blinked into existence to the south. Moments later, a third appeared to the west. 3 luminous orbs now hung in the night sky, evenly spaced, moving slowly in a silent formation. Each glowed softly, pulsing like breathing hearts. For a long moment, even the cicadas held still. Sergeant Roberts scrambled up next to Harris. Both men stared, frozen, every muscle tensed. Roberts could only nod. Neither had an explanation. In that instant, every instinct told him to duck and retreat. The tension was so thick they could hardly breathe. Harris's voice shook. "What the hell is that?" No one spoke. Fear had everyone in its grip. The first thing I remember thinking was, "What the hell are those?" Private Dave Nguyen would recall years later. His voice was still thick with adrenaline. He had knelt behind a mortar piece, watching as the orbs glided over the canopy. To Nguyen, each one looked like a little star moving through the forest, soft and golden against the black sky. They passed over the base's flare circle, slow as if trying to hypnotize them. None had any frame, just light, as if someone switched on mini suns in the jungle roof. Every man in that moment knew something incredible was happening. They expected the worst, an ambush or an airstrike, but got only unanswered wonders. When one of the lights made a lazy turn directly overhead, Nguyen could hear his own ragged breathing in his ears. He felt an eerie calm as the last orb disappeared. A calm before something terrible, maybe. He couldn't be sure his eyes weren't betraying him. Harris finally keyed his radio. Base HQ, this is Tower Control. Unidentified contacts, over. His voice cracked. For a moment, there was only static crackling back. Lieutenant Diaz's assistant, Chief Warrant Officer Ramirez, grabbed the handset. Tower! Repeat your call sign! Again, only white noise. Ramirez could sense her worry on the other end. Tower, do you read? He asked. No response. It was as if the airwaves themselves had vanished for a heartbeat. All the operators in the bunker held their breath. Ramirez's knuckles whitened in the handset. Roberts swore quietly. He threw on a red lens flasher and held it up. The bulb cast an orange ring on the sky. The nearest orb pulsed under the light, but didn't break. Not a supply drop, Rodriguez muttered. Look at that thing. He slammed his fist on the table and grabbed the mic. Everyone up! Eyes on the lights! Two men from the gun pits scrambled up. The golden orbs floated just at treetop level, holding position as bullets whizzed around them. Every heart in the bunker thudded in unison. The bullets from down below left vapor trails of smoke around them, but nothing hit. Even two M60s trained on them couldn't faze them. The lights just drifted slowly, uncaring of every shot. They stood to the ready, shaking at what they saw. Sergeant Roberts thought, this isn't a joke or a trick. Those lights are real. That's when I knew it wasn't flares, Rodriguez would later say. The orbs hadn't moved like any man-made object. They glided almost lazily. Nguyen let loose a sustained burst on the closest orb. The sphere trembled under fire, then, with no explosion or rubble, simply winked out. The fiery tracers lanced into the darkness but met nothing solid. They fired round after round, desperate to hit something tangible. One by one, the orbs flickered in sympathy and vanished like someone switched the lights off. It was as if someone had pulled a blanket over lamps. For those bullets to do nothing was astounding. They emptied their belts, but nothing fell. Then time resumed its course, and the lights were gone. All they had was each other's wide eyes. Meanwhile, downstairs in the comms bunker, the radio hissed back on. Ramirez grabbed the intercom. Tower, report in! Silence answered. Tower, do you read? He barked again. No response came through. He could sense it. Something was jamming them. Something beyond their tech. Suddenly, the lights were already moving again. The world was pausing for them, and then snapping back. Private Nguyen slid onto the sandbags and shouldered his M60. All right, he muttered, and opened fire on the nearest orb. The barrel barked. Tracers stitched into the darkness. The orb above quivered as the tracers hit, then, with no explosion, simply winked out. The other two orbs shuddered and vanished one by one. Nguyen froze, shaking. No crash or explosion followed. Spent shell casings rolled off the embankment as he fired. He had stumbled back, heart pounding. It was as if the lights had just switched off. For 3 seconds, utter silence fell. Silence screamed in their ears. He dropped to the ground, chest heaving. Then, Lieutenant Diaz shouted, "Illuminate!" 2 howitzers spit tracer rounds high into the night, followed by M79 flares. The night briefly turned to day as one flak round bloomed into a golden flare overhead. For a moment, every man shielded his eyes from the brilliance, expecting the orbs to burn away. Even for the first time that night, she felt truly afraid. But when the glow faded, the sky was empty once more. Those flares gave them a flash of hope, then took it away. They had reached for weapons, only to find silence. By dawn, a response team had arrived. Cobra gunships roared overhead, scanning the valley in serpentine patterns. The soldiers of Firebase Warwalker handed over their weapons, corpsmen gave everyone a once-over, and the medevac choppers searched every ravine and treetop for wreckage. One rifleman quietly recounted the entire event to himself as helicopters passed overhead. New spiders settled in the mess hall at first light, undisturbed by bullets or flares. The log for that morning was surreal. Position secure. No hostile activity. No one even wrote about lights, as if the night's visitors had never been there. The guns were cleaned, rounds still in tubes. A coffee machine sputtered to life, each man staring into its hiss. It was as if the night was a bad dream, and everyone let out an uneasy laugh to hide that the fear lingered. The base settled back into routine, though something among the men had changed. Some tried to laugh it off. "Enemy balloons," one quipped. "Yeah, sure," another snorted. They passed around tin mugs of cold coffee in silence. Each felt the eyes on the tree line, each forced a smile when the other looked. No one really believed it was a hallucination. Jokes could no longer chase away the dread. They all knew a slim chance of mortar or mortar ricochet couldn't explain it. It was like telling kids there's no Santa. The jokes were a lifeline. Over the next few days, speculation ran wild. Ball lightning, one suggested. "Swamp gas," said another. One of the older radio men had even read some after-action notes from Chulai, where someone dismissively chalked it up to fatigue. An archives blog in 2011 noted that on that same full moon night, someone sneered it was only the well-known ball lightning phenomenon, nothing to do with extraterrestrials. They shook their heads. No satisfying answer emerged. In the end, all they had was the sky. Lieutenant Diaz kept her mouth shut about theories. She'd been ordered to. In her private journal, she wrote, "In 15 months of combat, I've never seen anything like it." She never told the brass, but every night she double-checked her perimeter map before sleeping. The brass would call it combat stress and move on. But in her quarters, Diaz stared at her rifle and wondered if she'd really seen stars falling into the jungle. Of course, it could have been a secret aircraft. Captain George Filer, an Air Force intelligence officer, once said some of these Vietnam-era UFOs had performance far beyond anything in known military arsenals. Imagine if something like that was hovering over your gun lines. Maybe the North Vietnamese had captured a US drone, or maybe the Russians were testing prototypes. It should never have happened, yet it did. They carried it like a secret burden. In press reports years later, even top brass admitted they couldn't explain it. General George S. Brown, Deputy Commander for Air Operations, once quipped, "We didn't call them UFOs. They were called enemy helicopters." Of course, the VC had no helos on scene. Still, the label stuck, because admitting unknown lights to the public was unthinkable. When asked again, spokesmen only blamed fatigue and nerves. They handed out the familiar line, "Must have been tired soldiers," or "combat exhaustion." That cover story fit too neatly for the men who had just seen the truth. Down in the humid haze, none of the grunts believed any of it. To them, those lights were as real as noon. "Just like a little star moving through the trees," one private said later. They knew it fit a pattern. Soldiers from World War II's Foo Fighters to modern Vietnam have reported the same inexplicable lights. It was as if those lights branded their souls. Every patrolman remembered the glow. Every troop from that night swore on their life it happened exactly as told, and not one of their jokes could reach the truth. It was terrifying and undefinable. Why does any of it matter now? Because no matter what explanation you try, swamp gas, secret helicopter, lens flare, you still have this. Men saw lights. Clear lights. Lights no friendly pilot ever reported, and no enemy claimed. No wreckage, no ambush, just lights in the night. They each tucked the memory away like a secret medal. They'd never get medals for surviving a mystery, but they'd never get rid of it either. Actually, the archives had the last word. As one Army historian put it, after digging into the files, "The truth may be out there, but it isn't in these records." It's as if someone quietly decided this story didn't belong in ink. They never found it on radar, never took a photograph, just the empty sky as their witness. But the silence in the books didn't stop it echoing in the men's minds. And the sky over that base that night was no blank page. 3 lights floated in a new kind of silence. And that silence, like the record, remains unbroken. So the story drifts into legend. Was it an experiment? Aliens? A trick of war? We may never know. And maybe that's what scares us most. Some nights, the old soldiers still ask each other, if you were hunkered down and saw that light, what then? They lived it. They just made sure the logbooks forgot.